the pain of solitude and wanted to spare her that suffering.
Those children died so that we could live. So we had to succeed, no matter what. To fail would mean it was all for nothing.
We'll take care of them. Don't worry. And we will never forget the Endless. Neither them, nor the time we spent with you.
This won't be my usual scripted content. These are just my overall thoughts on Dawntrail's dungeons, trials, story, standout characters, and future plot threads I think the devs are setting up, so don't expect this to be a super detailed review. Just one man's quick thoughts on certain parts of 7.0's base story expansion. So let's start off with the thing everyone has an opinion on, and that's the story. The first half of Dawntrail focuses on following the journey of Wuk Lamat as a claimant to become the new Dawn servant, while you follow as her mentor with your other comrades. This half of the story consists of Wuk Lamat and the crew completing the challenges of the various electors chosen by Galoo Jaja. During all of these challenges, there is exposition that expands the lore of Taral and makes this continent feel more lived in, which culminates in a tease of the Golden City and the coronation of the new Dawn servants. I know exposition isn't the most exciting to most people, but I personally expected this to be a thing considering we're on a whole new side of the planet, and honestly, as someone who is in school and wants to write in the video game industry, exposition is a necessary evil for a long ongoing series. But this doesn't mean that that's all this part of the story has to offer, with it having very strong character writing. And this is with the Scions who are in Taral at this point taking a step back to new characters like Wuk Lamat, Kona, Galoo Jaja, Erenvale, and one of my favorite new characters, Bakul Jaja. Also, I personally feel like every mini arc in this half of the story legitimately has one or two memorable moments, which is more than I can say for some other expansions in this game. But the base story of Dawntrail has more to offer, with its second half building upon what the first half established. It focuses on the invasion of Alexandria from another reflection, and this nation's attempt to conquer Taral and the rest of the Source in order to sustain their disturbing use of souls and memories. It does an excellent job of flipping the tone and feeling the expansion gives off until this point. The areas I explored with the Scions genuinely felt different from anything else before. This sense of unease is something I've personally never felt before in Final Fantasy XIV, with the story slowly dropping hints and clues about everything not being right in Alexandria, in contrast to the citizens feeling like it's a paradise. Until finally the needle drops and the story is all gas and no brakes until the very end of the story. The standout characters in this part of the story are Wuk Lamat, Speen, Cryo, Erenvale, Kakikua, and Otis, with Saralja being on the borderline. My guess is that he'll be fleshed out in the post patches after his death. But as someone who got back into Final Fantasy XIV during the 2020 lockdown and has made multiple recaps of the MSQ, raids, and Alliance raid stories, my memories are very fresh. So from a main story perspective, I would currently place Dawntrail's base story third under Endwalker and Shadowbringers, but above A Realm Reborn, Stormblood, and yes, Heavensward. Obviously, my current opinion could change with the post-patch story and how they transition into 8.0, but this is where I currently stand. But getting that out of the way, the MSQ accomplishes a lot here, with the first dungeon of Dawntrail being a notable step up in difficulty from Endwalker that I felt was too easy. At this point in time, the max level of the game is 100, and I feel that it's perfectly acceptable that the devs asked a little bit more of the casual fans to keep story dungeons and trials interesting. This is my general opinion on all of the combat content in base Dawntrail, and would personally love for the devs to confirm where they would place these trials against previous extremes, which could lead to some casuals like myself going back to do previous extremes, raids, and even jump into current extreme and savage content during this expansion cycle. I won't talk about every character I like in this section because it would become way too long, and I plan on making a more detailed video essay once the Dawntrail story is finished, so I'll narrow it down to the one you all want to hear about. Wuk Lamat, she is the main character of Dawntrail, so if you're not a fan of her, it's very likely you won't like the story. Personally, I enjoyed her story, and considering we don't have many characters within Final Fantasy XIV that are like her, she was a breath of fresh air. Being in the same vein of shonen protagonists, most noticeably similar to Naruto in my opinion, she goes through her own trials and tribulations. Like her feelings of inadequacy when compared to her older brothers, if her desire comes from within or out of necessity towards Zoraija, living up to the legacy of her father, and even falters in her self-confidence when realizing how sheltered of a life she lived, wondering if she can manage to be a capable ruler. In the first half of the story, these struggles are introduced and are addressed in great ways. In comparison, the second half of the story shows off the growth and progress she's made during her journey with you. I believe that Wuk Lamat is a well-written character, but there are some issues with her being overwritten and used as almost the sole mouthpiece for the story themes of the expansion, leading to her having a lot more lines compared to any other character, and understandably leaving many players tired of seeing her. I think the best thing for her moving forward is for the lead writers to spread the message that they want to express across the cast more evenly, like it was during the last zone of Dawntrail between Wuk Lamat, Vale, and Cryo. Honestly, it's just a disservice to the other characters in Dawntrail, and most obviously Wuk Lamat herself. If Dawntrail is supposed to be a new A Realm Reborn for this upcoming saga, it has done an excellent job of introducing new ideas and threads that can be expanded upon for future expansions. From a character casually talking about Taral being cut in half during a battle between very powerful beings, expanding on the concept of the rift between worlds being able to sustain life, which Zero talked about in the Endwalker post-patch story, but now it's confirmed that entire kingdoms like Alexandria can exist within the rift for long periods of time, meaning that there are possibly other societies, powerful entities, and possibly entire worlds that just exist within the rift, which greatly expands the universe of Final Fantasy XIV. Then there's the concept of manipulating the parts of a person and what makes up a person, with this being the central plot point of the Pandemonium raid story in Endwalker, and that idea has been added onto in Dawntrail, with the Alexandrians manipulating souls and memories for their own purpose, with people like Otis having his soul placed in a new vessel and memories having a physical form, and both of these beings existing simultaneously. It truly calls into question what makes a person and what type of beings could we meet down the line, and how it could be used for evil. Then there's the leap in technology, with Alexandrians saving themselves from a rejoining with Electra. However, among all of the things that were introduced, this is the most in our face, with Azem's key enabling travel between reflections and the mystery behind it. This key has led to dimensional fusion, meaning that massive groups of people like Alexandrians and their land can exist on the source. This means that players have to question the geography of the source, and it leads me to wonder if parts of other reflections are already on the source, but they've merged so long ago that everyone just believes that they've always been there. In addition to this, it is very sneaky for the devs to let us see some parts of destroyed reflections without using time travel, and makes me very excited for the area design in future expansions. But to recap this section, Dawntrail has done an excellent job of planting seeds for the future stories of this game. But this wouldn't be a genuine video without me talking about the three main issues I had with Dawntrail. 1. Mission and story structure. While this issue didn't bother me too much throughout my MSQ playthrough, it's an issue nonetheless. There are multiple examples throughout the entire story of missions being awkwardly placed, like the entire debacle with finding a worker for the Moblins being a weirdly paced part of the story, or in the case of the Hanu and Pelu tribes parts of the story having 2 or 3 more missions each than those sections should have had. 2. The various issues with voice acting this expansion. Some characters not sounding like their usual selves, which could be a byproduct of this game being developed as we were coming out of a worldwide pandemic, as Yoshi P mentioned that the team was already working on Dawntrail before Endwalker released, and some actors not playing those characters in a while. In addition to this, there's a noticeable inconsistency in the voice recordings, with Y'shtola being the most notable out of all of these. Also, lastly, as far as the voice acting goes, there wasn't enough of it. Once again, Yoshi P mentioned in a live letter that Dawntrail's story is 20% longer than Endwalker, and it really does feel that way when there are a lot of cutscenes that feel like they should have been voiced or seemingly were planned to but never got around to it. And while I don't have the exact number, it feels like this story has the same amount of voice acting as Shadowbringers and Endwalker, but because it is a longer story, the space in between those voice cutscenes is longer than I'm used to when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV. 3. There aren't enough interactions between our group. There's more than enough between you and Wuk Lamat, seeing as she's the main character of this story, and you're basically the mentor who steps in when needed. However, outside of a few moments like when Cryo got Wuk Lamat to open up after the first dungeon, or some moments of Alizé advising Wuk Lamat occasionally, she doesn't interact with them enough in my personal opinion. In a story that focuses so much on the bonds between parents, their children, siblings, and their chosen family, you would think that the twins who were inspired by their grandfather to leave home at 15 to help save the world while dealing with their own father issues alongside their chosen family, or the lady following in the footsteps of her adopted grandfather by going out to see the world like he did and even take up arms to make sure that if another world-ending threat appears like the Endsinger, she can fight alongside those she cares about the most, would have a lot of advice for a princess who is the youngest among her siblings and adopted. But unfortunately, we don't get enough of that. However, this is the criticism that I'm most willing to walk back, considering the post patches could easily make this point invalid. Considering the themes of Dawntrail outside of Galuja, and even that's questionable because he's a child and may still be suppressing himself, our characters haven't dealt with grief yet, and I wouldn't be surprised that if the Dawntrail post-patch story was all about dealing with grief, Wuk Lamat and Kona having some time with their thoughts and realizing that their dad and brother are really gone, the citizens of Alexandria realizing that their eternal queen has finally gone to sleep, the nation of Tuliolo grieving the loss of its founding ruler, and among the main cast of this expansion, Alizé, Alphnode, and Cryo seem like characters who could shine in circumstances like this, but we'll have to wait and see. This video isn't my usual deep dive, but rather quick thoughts on Dawntrail's story, characters, dungeons, trials, and potential future plot threads. Overall, Dawntrail builds a strong foundation for Final Fantasy XIV's future, with room for growth in post-patch content. While not without flaws, I'm optimistic about where the story is headed. So with that being said, if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and subscribe, and even become a member. Also, check out some more of my content, which is on screen right now.